Welcome to the Zachrilege Cast podcast, YouTube video interview program that features me talking to some of the best and brightest in the atheist slash secular slash awesome community. This is episode number 119. I'm recording live on November 7th, 2017. I would like to thank last week's guest, and this will be as narcissistic as we ever get. Me, I just talked. But really, thanks to Matthew the Apostle for getting over his post-related issues to listen, and of course, Jeannie for being on, and for once, having no questions. Yeah, occasionally there will be the echo there. So tonight's guest is an author, so he has the best words. Evan Davids is the author of Christianity No Longer Makes Sense. This isn't necessarily not a context quote because it's from the book, but I'll go ahead and put it out there. My target is conservative Christianity, formerly known as Christianity. Welcome to the show.
Hello, thanks for having me. So I had a delay, a pretty heavy delay a second ago, but it just cleared. So if I look confused, that might be happening.
Yeah, it sometimes happens. I will forget that I had the actual cast on a separate window and it has a delay and I'll start talking to myself, and that's not good.
Okay. As
everybody knows. So before we get to the book, although this kind of has to do with the book, what was your own personal religious background?
Yeah, so I actually, well, let's see. I first got into this because I wanted to find out what was true. It was a search. It was a spiritual search, and I wanted to figure out what's true. And early on, I was just. This might sound a little strange, but I was troubled by existence, and just thought it was so weird that everyone was walking around and going about their lives and as if everything was normal. So I was really troubled with this. What are we doing here? And how is there such thing as consciousness? How is there anything at all? Why is there something rather than nothing? And so I had these big questions. And I guess growing up in the West, you just kind of assume that Christianity has the answers. You see churches everywhere, and Easter and Christmas are widely celebrated. And you just kind of assume, okay, that's where you go. Those guys have it figured out. Obviously, why else would they have churches everywhere? But I did grow up in a secular home, and so we didn't really go to church. Maybe occasional holiday, but it just wasn't really an issue. And I didn't really have any friends that went to church either. So I just kind of had these secret thoughts where it was completely kept to myself, but I was troubled by this, and I figured, one day I'll get to this and figure it out. But I was kind of comforted thinking that these guys had it figured out. But anyway, fast forward, I ended up looking into it eventually, and then here I am with a book called Christianity No Longer Makes Sense. I guess maybe I could add, I think I did operate as a theist for a long time. Just even though I didn't carry the label Christian, I still prayed and felt like I had a relationship with God, and thought things happened for a reason, kind of looked for meaning behind things. And I think it was a really gradual slide into deism, because I just couldn't square a theistic intervening God with the facts on the ground. So that troubled me. And anyway, what else?
But I almost have to, this is a weird one. I almost have to challenge you, because you say Christianity no longer makes sense in your title, but for you, did Christianity ever really make sense?
Well, I didn't really know what it was. I just assumed it meant there was a God, and he cared about us, and you could pray to him, and you should be a good person, that kind of thing. Once I looked into it and found out that it's something you kind of have to sign up for, like you actually need to be saved from something, I thought that was a little strange. Like, okay, no, this is getting a little weird. But it's funny you say that. When I was at the California Free Thought Day in Sacramento recently, that was the first time I'd really publicly presented my book and had face-to-face interaction. And that comment came up all the time. I said, "What do you mean?" Granted, this is a skeptical atheist audience, what do you mean Christianity no longer makes sense? Did it ever make sense? And so yeah, that was interesting, because I guess I can, once we get into the book, I can clarify why it no longer makes sense. But actually, I might as well do that now. So
Yeah, exactly.
so
Don't keep the people waiting.
yeah, so I think what people were saying is, you know, virgin births and people rising from the dead, that doesn't make sense. That never made sense. So fair enough, right? That's not really what I'm talking about. It's not that's basically a rejection of supernaturalism, right? Christians know that virgins don't get pregnant and dead people don't rise from the dead. But that's the point, right? It's supernatural. So virgins getting pregnant never made sense. It's not supposed to in a naturalistic worldview. And then on the Christian side, some people say, well, of course it doesn't make sense. You know, this is an infinite God who's so mysterious we can't comprehend him. But I'm not talking about things like the Trinity, for example. Like, right, that doesn't make sense. It never really did make sense. What I am talking about is things that used to make sense to Christians that no longer do. Right? I think time has been cruel to Christianity. Things that used to be believable no longer are. Things that used to be morally acceptable no longer are. How's that?
That sounds about right.
Yeah, so I can get into some examples if you'd like.
Oh, you got a lot of
By the way,
examples, that's for sure.
yeah, is it okay if I drink beer on this podcast? I don't know.
Is it okay
What
if
the
you drink
etiquette is
beer?
here?
Oh, that's the best question ever. Yeah. I did want to, answer that question by saying I was in Nashville last weekend, and I was trying to talk to my father about the crazy beers that I was looking at and buying. And he just said to me, why don't, and this is what a lot of people say are not into craft beer say, don't they just do beer anymore? Because the beer I have is from Victory, and it's Black Forest Cake Stout. So this is a stout supposed to taste like Black Forest cake and have cherry in it.
Wow.
I'm on the third, not my third one tonight, but my third one overall, and I'm still not sure if the cherry's not quite, it's kind of like they mixed the cherry with the bitter, but I felt like that was one I was going to have tonight. No, you feel free to have it, and of course, describe what you have, because we like to share.
Who asked you if they just make beer anymore?
Well,
So
my dad.
I found this beer in my fridge. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. It's called a Pabst Blue Ribbon.
Ooh,
that's a
hipster right there.
Is it? It's a boutique, hard to find beer, and it's in this nice 24-ounce can.
See, I prefer the big cans. I remember in the 90s, like the 40. But what I've seen now is there's the I forget what the one is that's like it's the light beer, but it's like a heavier version, and it comes in a 42-ounce plastic bottle.
Really?
It's 42. I'm like, 42 just doesn't have the ring that the 40 had. And there's something about having the glass bottle and the paper bag, which probably makes sense for no one who's younger, but that's okay. None of those people
I
listen
remember
to the show.
Well. I actually found a 64 once when I was on vacation. I don't know. It wasn't California. I haven't seen them here, but anyway, we had to buy it just because it was a 64. This was a long time ago. But to tell you the truth, I don't know. I like cheap beer. I don't know what that does for our relationship, Zach. But
I know. Oh, we're just starting on a tough spot here,
Yeah.
It's like telling me you see Jesus on the side. I don't know. We'll have to work this one out. You are well, the thing is, I always talk to people about, you have, this city has really good craft beer. Every city has really good craft beer.
Yeah.
And it can be as expensive as you want it.
Uh-oh, I lost you. There we go.
You probably could find something better, but you got what you have. Drink what you like, read what you like, and of course write what you like. So what was you kind of started with the idea of your book, what came up. So if you happen to be in an elevator with someone you knew as a Christian and you wanted to sell them on your book, what would you say? Oh,
that's a good question. Let's see. It's in a nutshell, I would list. I kind of broke the book into three sections, three things that no longer make sense. So one being the fall, two being hell, that lovely belief that non-Christians will be kept alive for all eternity in utter misery, and the behavior of Yahweh, the biblical God. Those things, those are the main things that I found early on when I started looking into Christianity. I thought, these are big issues that don't make sense. So it's interesting. After looking into it for a long time, I stuck with those issues and expanded on those, because I think there's no good answer for these things. These are things that I think modern Christians are very uncomfortable with, and yeah, I mean, we could expand on any of those. I guess I'm still in an elevator pitch, so.
Yeah, we're starting with the
Yeah,
small, and then
yeah,
we'll
I'd have to
expand.
throw those little grenades out to them, and then we'd probably leave the elevator and figure it out from there.
I think I already have your title for your second book. PBR no longer makes sense. That'll be that. It's a secular's journey into craft beer. Maybe I should ghostwrite that. Put your name on it. You got a name people can trust. I don't. So that'll work.
Yeah.
But when did we'll go back into the kind of creation. Okay, so you came with your three main kind of ideas. I mean, what about hell? Like, when you really look at the Bible, what is in it about hell? I don't think hell existed. The Jewish version of hell was in like the Old Testament, but in the New Testament, Jesus is the one who tells us about this place, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's a huge problem too. This disconnect of theology between the Old Testament and New Testament. I mean, to me, it's glaring that there's just no indication that people need to be saved from eternal damnation. There isn't such thing. I mean, you get this one little line in Daniel, the last book that's written in the Old Testament. But yeah, no, people died and they just kind of slept in Sheol. And it was just different theology. But it eventually, I think it's in that intertestamental period, this idea does develop of, justice will come in the next life, right? And you'll have eternal bliss or eternal punishment. So it's, yeah, if you ask me, it's a pretty sloppy fit. But it's, yeah, there's just so many things wrong with it. I mean, we could go down a lot of different routes. There's logistical problems. There's obviously the moral problem that God would punish his little critters for all eternity. People who had no say in their being born, right, and are just unavoidably deserving of damnation for being these sinful little critters.
Well, do you consider the target audience of your book more atheists? Are you searching for maybe people on the liberal Christian side who might be willing to at least listen to your arguments?
No, I think it's targeted towards Christians, probably not liberal Christians, right? But I think more conservative Christians, and even like these progressive evangelicals that are kind of trying to hang on to the theology. They know they have problems with inerrancy, they have problems with creationism, and they have these questions, but they still want to stay in the evangelical fold. I depending on who I'm talking to, it's a completely different conversation. But I think it would definitely be targeted at Christians because yeah, I'm responding to Christian books. It's basically a counter apologetics book. I'm reading Christian apologetics and responding to that. So I would hope to have a Christian audience. I think that's easier said than done. But I think skeptics would enjoy it too, because I think if you're interested in this stuff, I think you want to see where the arguments are, where are the fault lines, and just as a lot of Christians don't have great reasons for being Christians, they don't understand their theology. There's a lot of atheists who don't have great reasons for rejecting Christianity, right, or being atheists. So I think it's helpful for anyone who's interested in this, but ideally, I'd like Christians to read this and see what they think. Uh-oh, we froze again.
'Tis the way of the internet. So what are some of the claims in the Bible that you mentioned that were unfalsifiable, like even maybe 100 years ago, but are now very much quite falsifiable?
Yeah, yeah. So that's big for the title. Christianity no longer makes sense. So I talk about these unfalsifiable claims. I mean, so many claims in religion are unfalsifiable. Like God is three persons in one. Okay, you can't verify that, right? You can just believe it or not, but it's unfalsifiable. But what I'm saying is 500 years ago, you could pretty much say anything about human origins, where we came from, the history of the earth, and no one could prove you wrong. We just didn't have access to that information. It just wasn't available. It's not that they were stupid; they just didn't have it. And the Bible we're talking about 2,000-3,000 years ago. But a mere 500 years ago, we didn't know. I mean, there's no reason, if you're a Christian or if you're in a Christian society, to doubt that the earth is more than 6,000 years old, or that Adam and Eve, that's where we came from, right? God created a man and a woman in the beginning, and that's where we came from. But on this side of the scientific revolution, you have a different picture. You have a story that's emerged that is completely at odds with the Christian worldview. So I just think this is kind of an Achilles heel for Christianity. This is a major part of their worldview. The fact that we're fallen, Adam and Eve fell and contaminated every human being, and they now need a savior. And now all of a sudden, that story is not true. At least not in some plain literal way. And now you have all these Christians working to try to make it true. So one thing, I do focus on that a lot because I think it's big, but evolution obviously isn't brand new, right? It's been here for 150 years, but Christianity has persisted. We'll side liberal Christianity, but just like your quote you started with, traditional Christianity or conservative Christianity, formally Christianity, right? That is dependent on this fall, and it just breaks down now that we know how humans started. So I mean, here's the deal: evolution is a completely different picture, and so here's what I was going to say. Sorry, I lost my thought for a second. So now what's happening is you have way more evangelicals, more conservative Christians who are realizing that evolution is here to stay, right? So in the past, they would just reject it. Evolution's not true. Or you reject the pieces you don't like. Okay, maybe I'll take micro, but not macro evolution. I'll take some evolution, but not human evolution. But at this point, the writing's on the wall. The jig is up. There are a lot of evangelicals who are realizing that they have to make peace with evolution. And as far as I can tell, it's because of all the breakthroughs we've had in genetics recently. So this side of the Human Genome Project and all the genetic breakthroughs, it's corroborated the fossil record and everything scientists have been saying, and there's just no denying it anymore. And so Christianity knows that they're in a precarious place. At least some of them do. A lot of them, this is a fight within evangelical Christianity. A lot of them, are still going to hold the line because they know what's at stake. Once you get rid of Adam and Eve in the fall, things start to unravel. So I think that's what's happening right now. I think there's enough Christians realizing that they have to make peace with evolution. And if you ask me, obviously, they don't go together.
Yeah, some people say going to Twitter is like the worst idea that exists. But I saw recently a Christian post to an atheist that no Christian believed in evolution. And then the response was, well, actually, the Catholic Church has accepted evolution. Now, whether Christians believe Catholics, it's so weird that Christians say Catholics aren't Christian because they pretty much invented the whole thing. But yeah, you can tell that things like change over time because the whole microevolution versus macroevolution. It's like
Yeah.
microevolution is just the tip version, but you're still having sex, and it is evolution. It's not like, oh well, the explanation is always like, well, my cat doesn't turn into an otter or something. It's like, well, no one has actually put that up as a theory, so that is
Yeah, a
just a
lot of
matter of.
strawman. Well, you know, the Catholic Church, you bring that up. That's a really interesting example because a lot of people are under the impression that there is no conflict because it's really easy to say there's no conflict. No, you know, God just chose to create through evolution. Um, but connecting the dots is another story. Holding on to original sin on one hand and the fall and evolution on the other, you can say there's no problem, but you need to do the work and connect them. So the Catholic Church is interesting because, and I give them credit for you know, post Vatican II, really opening themselves up to critical scholarship, biblical scholarship, evolution. Slow. I think it might have been when did that happen? I think there was a pope, yeah, around that time who said it's okay to believe in evolution, but you also need to believe in original sin and Adam and Eve. So you have a lot of this where you get the green light from the Catholic Church. It's okay to believe in evolution, but they don't do the work for you but you also have to believe in Adam and Eve and original sin. They haven't done the work to try to move those together. They just kind of green light it. And I think the Catholic Church is an interesting example. And I think what's happening is because I think it's a big tent, the Catholic Church, and you have so many people in there who have liberalized more than they're allowed to admit. Right? Remember, the Catholic Church has a 2,000-year-old paper trail, so you can only liberalize so much. So I think a lot of that dissonance comes from liberal priests and thinkers in the Catholic Church who know evolution is true, right? So that you have that, but they're also tethered to these traditional ideas, and that tension hasn't been worked out. And that's what I really wanted to figure out. I was trying to find out, okay, if people are saying you can do this, where's the evidence? Let's see it. So, I mean, I took some classes at a Catholic seminary, so it's interesting. I was shocked at how real the scholarship it was. It wasn't apologetic. So I think that's part of what's going on there. They're good at giving the impression that evolution works with Christianity.
Well, why does Adam's fall mean that God is dumb?
What? That that God is dumb?
Yeah, why does the fact that Adam falls when God basically sets him up to fall basically show that God might not have his whole story worked out?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not saying the original story is very good. Um, but it's even worse with evolution. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, God doesn't get through, his first generation goes awry, right? He creates humans and the first batch goes south. So I don't know. Yeah, maybe it looks like a design flaw. I'm not sure.
What was it like? So you mentioned going to, like, did you officially, I don't know, did you go to college for theology, or did you just get to take some classes
No, yeah.
just so you
So
could
I
get
guess,
exposed to here's what they actually teach as opposed to what they actually preach?
yeah, there's a big discrepancy there. But yeah, I guess I forgot a big chunk when I was telling my story earlier. Um, so yeah, I eventually, you know, I no, my degree was in finance, so nothing to do with theology. And again, it was still, you know, I just didn't have like a religious social scene at all, and I was kind of buttoned up and just didn't talk about this, but it was still there. So I went, got a job. I had a pretty good job, and I needed to figure this out. I wanted to know if this was true or not. So I actually quit my job and I moved up to Berkeley, California, and went to seminary there. And it's it's a really unique place. It's a group of actually 9 seminaries. So it's called the Graduate Theological Union. And what's so unique about it is you have this cluster of seminaries right next to UC Berkeley, and you can take classes at any of them. So there were three Catholic seminaries. There's an Episcopal seminary. There's a UU seminary. I think there's a Presbyterian and a Baptist one. So really cool. You have access to all these. And so yeah, I showed up, pretty much shocked everyone that knew me. I'm sure there's a lot of whispering behind my back that I've gone crazy. But like, you're quitting your job and you're going to go study, what is it called? What the hell's theology? And so I did it. I was just, I showed up as a non-religious person at theology. But at that point, I still thought maybe I could crack the code. I could find some liberal version of Christianity that made sense. And this was a liberal seminary. But yeah, back to your question. When I showed up, it was pretty surprising how not evangelical or apologetic the scholarship was. It was real scholarship. I mean, I would forget that I was around Christian people and I thought I was around skeptics the whole time, because it was so critical. I mean, it was, for a lot of the people, most people showing up, right? They grew up in some mainline denomination. They were Methodists or they're Episcopalians, and then they show up and they make this big deal about deconstructing your theology and then reconstructing it. So you have to break it down, your childhood, your Sunday school versions of the faith, and then they show you what's really up, and then you build it back up. But so it wasn't jarring for me. It was probably jarring for some people. But here's a little story I remember. I took an Old Testament class at one of the Catholic seminaries there, and the teacher is saying, just kind of not tearing apart the Bible, just saying where it came from. So this story was borrowed from the Babylonians. Moses, didn't write the Pentateuch. We don't even know if Moses existed, and this story was smushed together, two different authors, and that's why it doesn't, it's so awkward. And just showing the human fingerprints all over the Bible. And so you can see, you can tell which are the Catholic students because they're wearing robes. I think the Franciscans had brown robes and the Dominicans had white robes. But anyway, they have robes, and I'm just thinking, man, these guys presumably are vowing to never have sex in their life, never get married. And they show up and it's like, is this stuff really true? Like, I was just think it would be such a hard pill to swallow. And I saw this with this guy in my class, and eventually he raises his hand and he's just kind of concerned. And he's like, but the Catholic position is that the Bible's inspired, right? And oh yeah, of course, that's the Catholic position, the Christian position. But it's tricky, and I think that's showing in a lot of these mainline denominations that are just declining in membership, and because you kind of go to seminary and realize this stuff's not true. I mean, that was my take.
Well, I've often heard from people who were raised religious and became atheists over time that what did it was they actually sat down and read the Bible. Because as you mentioned, the disconnect between the Old and New Testament. The New Testament is kind of like fan fiction from the Old Testament, and it was attempting to connect dots that really weren't.
Yeah, they tried. Yeah.
Now, in the I don't know, this whole seminary thing. So how long were you there, and did you get to go to the 9 different ones? And did you actually get a robe at some point, or do you have to actually do vows to get a robe?
Yeah, so I don't want to oversell my credentials because I was a seminary dropout. No robe for me. There's actually 2 different tracks. There's the MDiv for people who want to go into being pastors, and then there's just the MA, which is an academic route. So it's just getting a master's in. I was doing biblical studies. I was doing New Testament. So yeah, No robe for me. I wasn't in the Catholic. I was in the most. So you have to pick, because I didn't come with a denomination. So I went to they had a non-denominational one, which usually, today those are the conservative churches, but this was like the most liberal one. They didn't care, and so I went to that one. Let's see, what else? You got a few more questions in there.
Did you have to tell them that, like, you were religious, or was that part of signing up for seminary, or you're just like, hey, I want to go to class, and they're like, cool.
Yeah.
Here's the direction. Okay, you're non-denominational. Clearly, you have a non-denominational look about you.
No, they didn't care, and but that's one of the reasons why I ended up at a liberal seminary. Because when I first started looking into it, I found all these conservative seminaries, evangelical ones, that had all these cool class. I mean, the class titles sounded awesome. Yeah, I'd love to take that stuff. But then you read these doctrinal statements that you have to sign on with to become a student there. I affirm that I believe in the Trinity, and I believe that non-Christians will be in hell, and whatever it is, that pretty standard stuff. And I just thought, why would I sign up for? That's why I'm going to these places, to figure out if this stuff's true. Why am I signing up for backward scholarship, where I sign on the dotted line, this is what I believe, and then I'll go there and try to figure out how to make it true. So I wanted real scholarship. So that's why I did not go to a conservative one. One, I guess they probably wouldn't have taken me because I couldn't have signed it. But two, I don't want apologetics. I wanted to get the real deal. So this place, no, they don't care. They didn't care. They just accepted me. Nice people.
So why is backward scholarship such a problem for Bible scholars?
Well, I think backward scholarship
kind of described what it was, but you could go in a little more detail if you want.
Well, that's just the word that I've dubbed in my head for this, where you have your conclusion first and then you work backwards to figure out how to defend it. But I think that's well, yeah, I don't think that's good for any line of academics, but I think it's fairly common when with religion, when you already have the set doctrines. This is what orthodoxy is, and then we're going to figure out how to make sure that we can defend that. So I think backward scholarship is just apologetics. It's not an honest pursuit. You already know where you're headed. I wanted to figure out. I didn't know where I was going to land, really. I was pretty darn sure I wasn't going to become a young Earth creationist, but maybe I'd figure out, I don't know, some other viable path within the Christian realm. But at that point, it's like the Bible and Christianity has gotten this much wrong. Why would I sign up for the other parts? So here I am. Still not a Christian.
Did you get to interact with a lot of old and young Earth creationists, and you get to kind of maybe have the two of them debate each other?
No, not at this place. I mean, plus it's Berkeley, California, the most liberal place on the planet. But no, there weren't really creationists. It wasn't. No, I was surprised. I mean, there's a real divide where between the two realms of scholarship, where you have the conservative world, and then they were pretty opposed. I mean, it was for a lot of, and that's the thing with a lot of these mainline denominations, and for a lot of people going there, it was basically Christianity and Jesus became a vessel for delivering social justice in giving an earthly sermon, and it was, you just kind of take the good parts and turn it into something usable, which I like. I can't complain about that. These are good things. I just can't find a reason to call myself a Christian because I want the world to be a better place.
It's a good reason. So what was the result of the Evangelical Alliance's 2-year study of hell?
Oh, okay. That's a book I quoted a lot in my book, right?
Mm-hmm.
They Yeah, no, I use that a lot when I for my chapter on hell, and yeah, it was pretty orthodox. I mean, and it's a lot of discomfort for modern Christians, but they concluded that yes, hell has been part of Christianity for a long time, from the beginning, and this is the traditional view that non-believers will be kept alive for eternity and in utter misery. And it's uncomfortable sometimes, but it's the truth. So, um, I I have a bone to pick with Christianity on that. I don't know if if you read my book, you can see I don't really pull punches in that chapter because I don't think you can talk about hell honestly without just exposing how disgusting it is. And you can't really um, celebrate this loving God while believing that he's a monster at the same time. And I mean, I've read the apologetics, and I just think they're a joke. I don't think you can soft pedal eternal conscious torment. Um, I have an analogy that I use in the book. Yeah, sure, I'll go here. So, you have so pastors are really shy about hell these days. They still hold it, which is a pet peeve of mine, but they don't talk about it. They find other ways to get around it and just imply it. They don't like to bring it up because, you know, it probably is a little embarrassing and it might scare people away, but they still hold it. And so I talk about this video that Rick Warren has. You know, Rick Warren, the Purpose Driven Life mega
Yeah.
pastor. So he has this video called "What Does It Mean to Be Saved?" and it's like 20 minutes or something. And he gives this really nice speech, and it's feel good and it's consoling, and you feel the love. But not once does he even mention hell. And I just think that's so disingenuous when clearly, and I know he does believe in hell because there's other videos where he's pressed by other Christians. Are you a feel good guy? No, I believe in hell and it lasts forever and it's horrible. Um, but he doesn't, they don't mention it because they know it's embarrassing and they know it's grotesque. So, so I draw this analogy in my book. It's like a nutrition label where you list all these nice organic ingredients, all the vitamins, but you fail to mention that there's cat shit also in your in the in your cookie or whatever. And it's like you can't just leave that off. It matters that there's cat shit in your cookie. And it's a completely different picture. It changes everything. So I just think Christians don't know what to do with this doctrine.
Well, one question
Am I
that
overreacting, do you think?
I don't think so. I mean, one question that gets asked when it's a Christian and non-Christian is, especially if it's like a family member, the non-Christian will ask the Christian, hey, so you're going to heaven and you know this, but when you're in heaven, you're apparently able to see down to hell, and you're going to see family members and friends who are in hell. Aren't you going to be a little not happy about that? But you have to be spending the entire eternity worshiping God because that's what you do. So that's something that I feel like should cause a little cognitive dissonance, because
Totally.
how can you be happy if someone you love is suffering forever? And the whole infinite punishment for finite crime. I mean, sure, in this realm we do kill people for crime, but that's the end of the crime, end of the punishment right there. It doesn't last forever, and not fun.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a great point, and I don't think anyone has an answer to that, except it will just be having so much fun. I guess we won't notice. We'll understand at that point. Yeah, that's how it goes. We'll understand at that point that Grandma actually deserves to be punished for eternity. It'll just make sense to us then that's what, you know what? She thumbed her nose at God, and this is what Grandma gets. Pretty gross stuff.
And I know sometimes, and maybe this is the apologetics you're talking about, the talk about hell is like, well, hell isn't this terrible hot place. It's just separation from God, which of course for an atheist is like, Oh, you mean like Tuesday? Okay, we're bringing the tacos on, or let's just have a
Yeah.
party. But
Yeah.
that's not it. That's for them. Separation from God is supposedly the worst thing ever. But I guess I don't even know if they can imagine it. So that's hard to say.
Yeah, that's kind of one of my pet peeves, and it's definitely the trend where, you know what, hell's not devils with pitchforks and hot lava. No, no, you got the wrong idea, right? It's just separation from God. Uh, and like you said, okay, so you just keep on hanging out and watching Netflix and not going to church. No, it's the worst thing you could possibly imagine. It's just not pitchforks and hot lava. Okay, well, stop trying to soft pedal, something that's just the worst possible situation. So it's a ploy to put the believer's mind at ease, right? You know what? It's just separation from God. They didn't want to be with God anyway. So yeah, that is kind of a pet peeve of mine. That they're trying to give the impression that hell's not that bad, but you ask a few follow-up questions and it is the worst, and it never ends. Even after like 100 trillion years, you still have an eternity to go.
I would say an eternity of anything sounds bad. I mean, you get sick of even endless beer in heaven. You'd be like, all right, okay.
Yeah,
I've had them all like 15 times.
yeah, that's true. Yeah,
And in hell, maybe hell would be like every day. They're like, all right, the next season of Stranger Things is coming out tomorrow. We promise. And you just like, come on, I'm waiting. It's gonna be. You have Netflix. I've already seen it all. I'm tired of it. What's it gonna come out? Let's do a little slight transition. So, according to Christianity, and this might be a question you could ask a Christian, I suppose. According to Christianity, when can kids sin?
yeah. Well, I mean that's a great question, and if you have this belief that non-Christians will go to hell, people who don't make that faith commitment, it begs all kinds of uncomfortable questions, right? Like, yeah, what about kids who die? And this is really disgusting, but it's been a real question through Christian history: is what happens to babies when they die? And hence infant baptism, right? And then we're tying back in with original sin. These babies were born with Adam's guilt, right? We were all in Adam when he sinned, and we inherit his guilt. That was the Catholic position. That is the Catholic position, right? They're trying to figure out how to soften it at this point. But yeah, you get into these really horrible situations, and no one can tolerate that idea that babies who die will be punished forever. And so yeah, I think you were hinting at this age of accountability idea, where there's and that's become sort of popular with evangelicals now, because no one today can stomach this idea that babies go to hell. For a while, the Catholics floated this idea of limbo, where they just kind of stay in this neutral state, but that's not official doctrine. But the age of accountability seems to be the most popular today, and it's still absurd. I mean, it's this idea that there's one discrete moment in a child's life. Usually, they say it's like 12. They suspect it's around 12 years old. I don't know why. Where if the kid dies 1 second before this moment, then they go to eternal bliss. They're in heaven forever. 1 second after this, and eternal damnation, unless they've come to the proper beliefs, right? So a lot of Christians I've noticed, just trying to interact with this idea, is like, well, I don't know when it is. That's not important. Like, it's not for me to know when it is. But that's not the point. The point is that you're concocting such an idea. Like, there is such a point. It just shows you how contrived these things have to become in order to uphold these beliefs that have come out of Christian theology.
Well, I remember listening to, and I wish I could remember his name right now, ex-Muslim. And one of the stories that he always tells is he came up with this brilliant idea when he was like 13 years old that he would commit suicide because he would know, according to Islam, you were liable for sins at a certain age, which is
Yeah.
actually a younger age as a girl than a boy. So he
Oh, I didn't know
actually
that.
broke his leg and didn't commit suicide, but he had that idea. It was like, there's the loophole. I can, I will instantly go to heaven because this is before I am, liable for my sins. But it does, yeah, it is such a floating thing. Like my nephews were, infant baptized, but they also had to officially give in, and I don't know what age it was, 8 or 12, where they officially, said, okay,
Hmm.
this is blood. I'm drinking it. This is cool. That kind of thing. But it is one of those questions that, well, I guess the religious people have to answer. We have to figure out, what they think and why. And
But that's the thing. That I mean, that's a rational response to want to die. I mean, I this sounds disgusting, but you kind of hope kids would die before this, because why take the risk? Eternity is a long time. And if you get a free pass, why would you? I mean, that's where I start questioning, do Christians really believe this? Even the ones that profess it. Like this, it's just so radical that and grotesque that, I mean, if you really believe it, shouldn't you be at like old folks' home pleading with them? Look, when you die, in a few days or whatever, this is what you have in store for you. I mean, this, you'd warn somebody for any other earthly danger, and I think it's actually too horrible for people to really believe it, but sometimes you can't admit it. But it's true. I mean, Rob Bell, he was a former pastor who kind of got ejected from evangelicalhood for writing this book that questioned the doctrine of hell. He said, "Well, maybe the stuff's maybe we're a little off here. Maybe everyone gets saved." And so, Lauren Bells went off with all his fellow evangelical pastors, and he was basically booted out. But he brings up that exact point. He says, you know, sh- why take the risk having kids? So anyway, really, this was a really uplifting chapter to write, as you can
yeah, I
imagine.
know. Yeah, this is the feel good story of the year.
Hey, yeah, yeah.
Well, this is a little bit lighter. So, why is Yahweh into burning clean animals? And is this related to the clean food fad?
Wow, you know what? I have not thought about that. But it is a good point, and that I don't think a lot of modern Christians really realize, that the God that they celebrate and worship every Sunday is a very cherry-picked version of the biblical God. The biblical God does like the smell of burning animals, the soothing aroma, and but that's how gods were back then, right? Gods in the ancient Near East liked animal sacrifices, and the biblical God is no different. But as far as the current diet fad, I don't know if there's a tie in there or not.
I think there would be the official Bible kind of diet that has to. There, I guarantee there's a book. There's like 20 books out there. It just reminded me of the good old days, Barham Atheist and Susie saying, "I hate burnt offerings," because they're reading the Old Testament and that would come up so often. Burnt offerings are totally cool. It's like burnt ends. It's a good kind of barbecue. So what does God hate more, crushed testicles or women?
Oh man, let me think. Let me think. So, yeah, I mean, crushed testicles makes the list a couple of times in the Bible, right? He does not want priests or anybody serving him his food that has crushed testicles. That's not cool, because that profanes his sacred space. Um, I would say, there's a lot of really sexist things in the Bible too, obviously, but I think he really hates crushed testicles. That's the worst. He can't stand them.
So is that the one of the kind of inspirations for Jesus being like this perfect character, is because in the Old Testament, God wanted like the perfect hamburger, and God wanted wouldn't accept, like someone who had like an eye poked out was like not allowed in heaven in theory. And of course, Jesus, totally perfect, fits in.
Perfect testicles.
Well, it never did come up, huh?
Uh-oh. Yeah. But yeah, it is, I mean, the fact that, oh, he also does, it's not just crushed testicles, it's people with maimed limbs, it's dwarves, it's blind people. This just seems so obvious that this is an ancient god that's not real. And I mean, and I bring him up in my book. Imagine bringing that discrimination into the modern church. Well, we have an outer sanctuary for people, for dwarves, okay, because we don't want them to profane the inner sanctuary. And people with, who has crushed testicles? Do people still have those, or is that? I need to look that up. I'm not sure. Apparently, it was a thing, but
It's got to be based on a personal, yeah, some kind of weird personal story.
I don't know. Maybe it's still big. I don't know. I just don't hear about it.
But what was it? Was it really, from your studies, like Paul's big influence that led to kind of the downfall of women in the Bible being considered kind of second class citizens forever?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's probably not Paul. I think it's people writing in Paul's name. I think that's kind of the consensus, is that Paul was probably more egalitarian than what the Bible would suggest, because a lot of the stuff that's really sexist is stuff that was written in Paul's name. Whether it's an interpolation or an entire book. Should we do a scripture reading?
If you want, it could be our first. I don't know if we've, maybe from memory, but not. Yeah.
No, I'm not a memory guy. So I mean, yeah. So this is, First Timothy has some gems in it, and when I say gems, I mean turds. I permit no woman to teach or to have authority over a man. She is to keep silent. For Adam was formed first, then Eve, and Adam was not deceived, but the woman was deceived and became a transgressor. So, yeah, no one knows who wrote that, but this is a later writing. Most people will agree, and so maybe they squashed what Paul really had in mind. He was probably more egalitarian than the Bible. But the sad thing is, it doesn't matter if Paul wrote this or not. It became Holy Scripture. And it's sad because once it's in there, that has real consequences and has affected many people through the centuries. And back to the title of my book, Christianity No Longer Makes Sense. Sadly, for a long time, these passages weren't problematic, right? Because the culture was so patriarchal and sexist. But now these, as we've advanced, these do become embarrassing, and people now, apologists have to try to explain these things away, right? Oh, well, he's just talking about specific situations in specific churches in the first century. Well, no, if you look at that one I just read, what's the explanation for women not allowed to have authority over man? Well, first is because she was formed second, and because women are more easily deceived, right? This is like going back to creation. The Bible's making these sweeping claims about women, and it's too bad.
Yeah, and that's another thing that I kind of forgot. I mean, when I was read some of David Fitzgerald's work, and it's pretty much consensus, right, that Paul had 13 letters, but like 7 of them are actually his, and the rest aren't.
Yeah,
yet there's
7 undisputed letters.
There's no like, my bad, hey, take that out of the Bible. It's like, well, grandfather clause, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, and that's why more conservative scholars have to hold the line and say, nope, they're all real. Because, I mean, what does that say about the Bible if forgeries were allowed into it? I mean, this is supposed to be divinely inspired, and this is a divinely guided process. If you don't have that, things unravel. So, yeah, but it's true. That is the consensus, that there's 7 undisputed Pauline letters.
Now,
Which took a long.
eventually,
Go
your
ahead.
book raveled into a complete finished thing. When did you know during the writing process, all right, I'm finished? This is it. I can do no more. I have reached perfection.
Yeah, well, I definitely never thought I reached perfection, but it's basically just when I got sick of reviewing it, because I'm a one man show, so I don't. There's no editor or publisher. It's just I'm just reading over it. And the thing is, I could have kept it going forever. Every time I read through it, I would find things that I wanted to correct, and I was glad that I read through it and corrected it again. But eventually, I just said, you know what, I need to move on with my life. This has turned out to be a bigger project than I thought, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. But at the end, I had to let it go. So I don't know. I guess it's a combination of deciding it's good enough and you're sick of looking at it.
And when did it come out?
It was about a month and a half ago, I believe. Yeah. Yeah, I think it was in September.
Mid-September. We were so innocent back then.
Yeah, good old days.
Is there a sequel on the way?
I don't think so. I think at this point I would prefer to just start writing some blog articles and not torture myself writing full book. Who knows? It's kind of a luxury to be able to write a book. It was more time consuming than I thought, but I'd have to gear up for another one. Too early to say. I actually thought naively, I'm just going to bust this out. You know what? I pretty much already know what I want to say. And then once I started, I realized if I'm going to do this, I need to do it right. And I need to. So I just ended up buying more and more books from Amazon. I'd find new books. I need to understand what apologists are saying. What's the most recent apologetics? And I want to make sure that I'm dealing with that. But in the end, I feel like my initial suspicions when I first looked into Christianity, there's just not good answers for this stuff.
That's an interesting point. I was thinking, like any nonfiction book you read, you get the author's sources, and you usually they'll post like 100 books or so that they read to come up with the one. And I think with fiction, it's the same. You read a bunch of stuff to get there.
True.
So
Yeah.
you put a lot in to get that one thing out.
Yeah.
Now, one thing you got to do in real life, you actually got to see some fellow heathens there at California. What was it like to be at California Free Thought Day? And what was it like for atheists to actually like get along with each other? We haven't been talking about that for a while.
Yeah, so I've heard. Yeah, it was awesome. I was telling you earlier before we hit record. That was the first event I had really ever been to. So I haven't really been in the scene. I just I wrote this book and I have my immediate friends and stuff, but I hadn't been to one of those conventions, and it was great just to connect with some interesting people. Yeah, who was it? Ryan Bell was the host. He emceed it. A lot of good speakers. I sat next to David Fitzgerald, who you mentioned earlier. I think he's been on your podcast, right?
Yep.
So yeah, our tables were next to each other. So that was great. I got to meet him and kind of brush up on my mythicism. And then yeah, later on that night, informally, a lot of the organizers and some of the speakers and authors got together and had a few beers, and that was great. Just super nice people. Yeah, I'll be back.
So what is a non-atheist interest of yours?
Oh, let's see. I like music a lot. I like soccer. Been playing soccer for a long time. Uh-oh, you're a football guy. Are you an anti-soccer guy?
No, I actually attended the Atlanta FC playoff game.
Oh, nice.
I have to say, Tennessee Titan fans, since they moved to Nashville in '99, the in-home game day experience in the stadium at an Atlanta game versus Nashville, like an NFL game, you can't even compare it. Yeah. You don't sit down at a soccer game. It's about 2 hours long. as opposed to 3.5 NFL. They don't pump in the music. They don't try to get you going with some contrived stuff. And the fans are way more into it. But maybe, you know, it was since the major league team in Atlanta, this is their first year. The excitement level was pretty high, but they had some cool chants. I mean, come on, NFL teams, you should be able to come up with some unique chants, at least something that gets the flavor of the team, but it wasn't quite the same. But sadly, I got to watch one of the most painful. They don't have this in NFL football. Losing by penalty kicks, that's one of the most painful ways to lose in any sport.
They went to PKs, huh? Oh, that's, okay.
Yeah, I mean, you play. Everybody's like, "Oh God, why can't you work it out?" You can't work it out because you only have 3 substitutions. The NFL, they sub like 12 guys per play.
Yeah,
and they get like a 45-second break between plays. It's yeah. I could do soccer, although it's kind of sad now because the national team is dead, and the local team is out too. So it's like, oh, what's it? Well, there's a lot actually. There's always a ton of soccer going on. So
yeah, but yeah, the U.S. not qualifying for the World Cup is a disappointment because it's 4 years. You got to wait another 4 years. You know, it felt like last World Cup we were kind of gearing up in a way for the next World Cup, but we missed it. But anyway, we'll get there.
We've been through a lot of worst case scenarios in this country lately. That was just another one. And yeah, that's what happened. But what happened with you is you wrote this book. So how do people find it? How do people get in touch with you? What's all that good stuff?
I have a website I put together after I put the book out, evandavids.com. I'm not very good at social media, but I want to be. So on Twitter, Evan_Davids. Okay, if you want to say hi to me there, that would be great. I don't have any friends, I don't think. Are they even called friends on Twitter? So yeah.
Sounds good.
That's where you can find me.
And before we call tonight, is there anything else that you wanted to cover that we didn't get to?
Oh, I don't think so. I mean, there's so many directions we could go in, but I think we did well. We did a lot of hell, didn't we?
We did a lot of hell. That might have been the most hell in one episode.
Yeah.
But in a good way. You know, in hell, you're going to have some quality companionship, if nothing else. Where you're being tortured forever for one thing you did in your life. But that's okay, because it's not real. We know the truth. Okay. So if you want to support this show, be like Bobby, Hugh, Teode, Marissa, go to patreon.com/Zachrilege. That's ZACHRILEGE. I can spell it after a beer. So can you. Follow me on Twitter at Zachrilege, like the Zachrilege Cast page on Facebook. Send all love mail and any guest ideas to zachrilege.cast@gmail.com. Thank you again, Evan, for being on tonight.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Please, listeners, stay safe. If you need to chat, I'm available. If you're an atheist and feel alone, you're not alone. Reach out. Let's chat. Get that human connectiveness that keeps people coming back every Sunday. Stay skeptical. Enjoy good beer or not good beer. It's all up to you. Stay skeptical. I love all y'all, and good night.